Early morning in New York City. A magazine vendor rants to an uninterested reader of a Black Frightener comic on what he feels about the world they live in and how his profession stays active when he sells newspapers reporting about it. A doomsday crier arrives to buy the newest issue of the New Frontiersman as usual, and tells the vendor that he has seen the signs of the world ending today, in the form of a two-headed cat born in Queens. Despite this, the crier still places an order for the next day's issue. Elsewhere, what is supposed to be a tender moment between Lori and Dr. Manhattan ends abruptly, when Lori is first weirded out by having more than one lover with her in the bed, and then when she realizes that Dr. Manhattan has used this tactic to multitask working while in the bed with her. Seeing him prioritize his work over her needs as a woman, Lori storms out of their shared home as her point is proven further, with Dr. Manhattan's attention being visibly divided, and her journey to her only friend she has left being intercut with an interview of an old and bitter Janie Slater, Dr. Manhattan's old flame from before her, who has nothing nice to say about him. Daniel welcomes Lori to his home while getting a new lock installed, and thanks her for the dinner they had last week before offering her coffee. As he is making her a cup, Lori bursts into tears, revealing that she has left Dr. Manhattan, and that she had nowhere else to go but Daniel, since she only knows other former vigilantes like her. Daniel shows support to Lori, who describes living with Dr. Manhattan being like a shadow in a fog, that he is too distracted from seeing by other things. While they talk, we see Dr. Manhattan putting on a suit, similar to the one he wore to Edward Blake's funeral, as he has to make another public appearance, this time on live television. Daniel invites Lori to join him on his weekly beer sitting with Hollis, and while they make their way towards Hollis's garage apartment, Dr. Manhattan arrives at the TV studio where he is scheduled to be interviewed. At the same time he steps in front of the live studio audience, Daniel and Lori are ambushed by a gang in an alley, but as former masked vigilantes they are more than capable of defending themselves from the gangbangers. Symbolically while they struggle, Dr. Manhattan is caught by a journalist in the audience, Doc Roth, who starts to bomb him with questions about his old friend and colleague Wally Weaver, who died of cancer in 1971. Dr. Manhattan dodges the question by remembering his passed away friend and having attended his funeral, to which Roth responds by bringing up the former villain Moloch, who has also developed cancer, along with Janie Slater, whom the journalist reveals to only have 6 months to live. This is news to Dr. Manhattan, which Roth uses to confront him with the accusation that his very presence had given these people cancer that killed them and is currently killing them. Dr. Manhattan's handlers call for the show to be over and tries to get Dr. Manhattan away from Roth and the other journalists trying to swarm around him, while at the same time, Daniel and Lori are catching their breaths from having defeated all the gang members attacking them. As they walk away from their assaulters, Dr. Manhattan's patience is drawn to its limits, and he uses his power to send the people swarming around him away. Lori decides to find a hotel for herself to think about her life, and leaves Daniel to make his way to Hollis alone. There he learns from Hollis about what happened during Dr. Manhattan's interview, which the vendor from the beginning of the issue celebrates as the kind of news that sell him profits. Dr. Manhattan arrives to his home to find it being marked as a quarantine zone, and asks for the worker painting warnings to pass a message to Lori and his superiors that he is going to leave literally everything behind as he teleports away from the clothes he is wearing. First he goes to an abandoned ghost town in Arizona to pick up an old photograph, before looking up to the stars in space and disappearing away from Earth. Next morning, the Doomsday Crier has arrived for his paper and basic news covering Dr. Manhattan's exile, with the vendor calling him out on how the world didn't end like he said. The Crier, taking his papers, simply asks the vendor if he is sure about that. Lori arrives to what used to be her home to find men in hazmat suits going through it with Geiger meters, and being told that with Dr. Manhattan gone, she no longer having a home there is the least of her problems, as the United States has lost their deterrent against Soviet Union in the Cold War. Rorschach arrives to bring Daniel the newspaper about Dr. Manhattan's exile, as evidence to support his theory about someone being after the former vigilantes, and to tell Daniel that he needs to get a new lock, since he broke the current one when coming in. The gravity of the situation hits the vendor when the papers brought to him to sell report that the Russians have invaded Afghanistan, which back in the 1980s was an ally of the United States. While President Nixon is brought up to speed on what the nuclear Armageddon would look like now, Dr. Manhattan walks contently on Mars with the old photograph he picked up from Arizona and sits down on a rock. I suppose this is where I should start acknowledging the 9-panel per page layout that this comic uses. We have previously seen it in my videos covering The Killing Joke and For the Man Who Has Everything. The former which used it more as the default, and the latter to lesser extent with 6 panels per page. Here, however, it is used to its proper potential, similarly as in The Killing Joke, with how time passes naturally on its own, as well as a framing device showing Jane is later being interviewed at the same time when Lori is making her way to Daniel. It is then used in a similar way of showing other 2 events happening at the same time, with Daniel and Lori walking into an alley to fight a gang, while Dr. Manhattan is caught off guard in his TV interview. It does also compress into a 6-panel layout for the urgency and drama, but otherwise the 9-panel layout works to move the story forward without pacing issues. I can recognize why and how this method can be used, and has been used by other writers and artists afterwards, like how Jeff Johns did with Doomsday Clock and the 3 Jokers. Okay, and then story-wise, as we move on from Edward Blake's part in the story, we come across some deconstructions of the superhero archetypes here, with how Lori does not have any other friends outside of Daniel as a fellow retired masked hero, who does not seem to have a proper life in his retirement, and has his only highlight in life being to meet up with his predecessor. Although I am somewhat confused how he can keep up with this lifestyle when he is not shown or mentioned to have a job as a source of income, at least in this issue, so I might end up coming back to this in a later video. The Black Friday comic's existence also brings up the fact that Superman and the Flash, the Jay Garrick version, did previously exist as fictional characters in this world. Unfortunately, when the Minutemen started running around, the novelty of costumed heroes died quickly, and in their place, we have pirate comics like Black Frightener instead. I did not acknowledge it much during the story commentary, and I feel like I should talk about it as a whole later for when it eventually becomes relevant. But so far it is told from the point of view of a sea captain, whose ship was attacked by the eponymous Black Friday. The unnamed sea captain knows that the ghost ship is on its way to his hometown, and is forced to make a raft out of the remains of his crew to get there before the Black Friday. That is all we get in this issue, so moving on to the way how Dr. Manhattan is seemingly forced into an exile. Even back in the 1980s when this was written, this was a fairly recognizable way of getting someone cancelled, by throwing dirt that even he is not aware of and cannot explain when asked a bunch of questions about it. Even this way how he reacts to the news that his presence could have given 3 people cancer is throwing more fuel to the fire with how it looks, but for the story reasons we get his superior's response in acknowledging that his absence is a bad thing for their situation with the Cold War. so letting us know that they did not do it, and as Rorschach is suspecting, there could be an unseen party targeting the former heroes. I mean, most of us familiar with Watchmen and its adaptations already know who made this situation happen and why, but that is not something to talk about yet. The situation turning into what it is with Dr. Manhattan's absence is also showcased with the newspaper vendor, who remains unnamed for now, and I will be calling him that for now. He is otherwise apathetic with Dr. Manhattan's exile, as long as his papers reporting about it are getting sold at his newsstand. But then the reality ends up hitting him on how much worse it's going to get now without the deterrent the US previously had, to the point where the vendor gives his hat to the boy who has been reading the comics he is selling for free. This side plot is told effectively with the Doomsday Crier, yes I know who he is but it's too early for that, who tells the vendor early in the issue that the world is going to end that day, and asks him when they next meet if he is sure about the world not having ended. Well, not literally, but the same safe-ish world that they still had the day before is no more the one they live in, with Dr. Manhattan no longer standing guard between the US and Soviet Union. Then there is how Daniel and Lori are fighting those gang members, which would be better to be talked about in more detail with the adaptations.
I said, leave me alone!
Before I get to that fight choreography, I should acknowledge how the first scene from the third issue exists as two scenes. The first scene from the comic takes place between the events of the first issue, after Rorschach has visited Daniel and before Daniel goes to visit Adrian. The vendor and his young customer have been cast and dressed like they were pulled straight out from the comic, while the Doomsday Crier does not speak at all in this scene. Rather, the vendor recognizes him as a regular customer who subscribes the New Frontiersman paper, collects it from his stand, and has seemingly come to ask if it has arrived multiple times before. And as he does not speak, the Doomsday Crier says nothing about having seen the signs of the world ending. Also because this scene happens earlier in the movie than in the comic. Next we see Lori leaving Dr. Manhattan, which actually has been tuned up to have Adrian remotely present when Lori catches Dr. Manhattan working with him. And that justifies Lori's outburst, as this could come across as emotional cheating, especially when Adrian is still present when they argue and Dr. Manhattan is still working with him, while trying to convince Lori that they can talk this out at the same time. And Adrian also tries to comfort Dr. Manhattan after Lori leaves him.
Don't worry, John, she'll be back.
I cannot show that, Steve. However, as we saw in the part 1 video, Lori is supposed to have a government escort tailing her when she is out on her own. So when she goes to Daniel as the only other person she knows, what are they doing when that happens? Probably delegated into preparing Dr. Manhattan's TV interview, in telling the host and producers what topics not to talk about. When Lori arrives to Daniel, he has already had his lock installed, and they have a standing conversation in his lobby, without Daniel offering Lori any coffee. Malin Ackerman also portrays Lori in this scene less emotionally without bursting into tears, but also like she is holding herself back from actually breaking down. Or maybe her performance could have been directed better than what we see here. When she and Daniel are then on their way to Hollis, we get that other scene doing the opening scene with the Doomsday Crier having come to ask for his paper from the vendor again, and exchanging glances with Daniel when he walks by with Lori. The movie also names the vendor as Bernie when his evening editions are delivered.
Seymour! Bernie, how's tricks? Fine.
When moving on to Dr. Manhattan's interview, the montage during which he is suiting up includes how he is already carrying the photograph that his comic book counterpart picked up later from Arizona, and like I said already, the TV studio has him accompanied by government handlers going over topics not to talk about. The interview itself before Doc Roth, played by John Shaw, starts bombing Dr. Manhattan with cancer-spreading accusations, includes him being asked about the threat of the nuclear war according to the symbolical doomsday clock, and deflecting it.
My father was a watchmaker. He abandoned it when Einstein discovered that time is relative. I would only agree that a symbolic clock is as nourishing to the intellect as a photograph of oxygen to a drowning man.
With a smug nod to his handlers afterwards. And to quickly acknowledge the fight in the alley that Daniel and Lori have against the gang while this is happening. On one hand, the original intention from the comic could have been to show that as former vigilantes they still had it in them to defend themselves, and subconsciously took an advantage of being ambushed to let out steam by beating them up. That could have been the case here, except that the fight choreography goes so far that the showing of force on the first few gang members attacking them should have scared the rest of them to run away. Especially when Lori escalates into using lethal force by snapping one's neck and stabbing another gang member's neck. That could probably make sense with her character, in how Lori is taking her issues and frustrations on the gang members, whereas Daniel, while still using excessive force, leaves the gang members he is fighting alive. And that nicely keeps up with how Daniel is still meant to be one of the genuinely heroic characters in this story. Then there is the dramatic change when Dr. Manhattan is confronted by Doc Roth, which starts with him apparently not having been aware of how his old colleague Wally Weaver had died of cancer.
Do you remember a man named Wally Weaver?
Yes, we were both physicists together at the Gila Flats research base.
He died of cancer.
He was a good man.
Roth also names a whole list of people than just Jacoby next, likely that same list that Blake told Jacoby about, who have also died of cancer before physically having Janie Slater, played by Laura Mendel, brought to the studio, despite the host attempting to tell him not to. This way there is a larger audience to see the state she is in, and hear what she has to say in blaming Dr. Manhattan for all of it. Now this was a great change for having her brought to the studio.
You were the world to me, John. You were my whole life.
The body language with Dr. Manhattan is...
Do you remember how many times
he is shocked.
Janie, I wasn't.
And he wasn't... And he didn't see this.
After the accident. I gave you everything. This is how you repay me?
Janie, I wasn't told. I didn't know.
Damn you, John. God damn you.
Janie.
Dr. Manhattan's reaction to her presence and trying to reach out to Janie as she leaves then triggers the scene where he gets warned by the reporters and is eventually forced to use his power to send them away so he can be left alone. Going back to what Alan Moore said about things that only work in the comic book format. This scene with Zack Snyder's direction and Billy Crudup's performance, at least from my observation, elevates this scene in showing what a shocking revelation it is to Dr. Manhattan by having him unintentionally show humanity in his response to Janie's appearance. I would assume that after Lori left him, Dr. Manhattan could have picked up the photograph to carry on himself as a reminder of his humanity that he has gradually been slipping out of, and when Janie appeared as another instrument to reveal that he has been slowly killing the people around him, his initial reaction is human, but the choice in going into exile is when Dr. Manhattan fully decides to leave his humanity behind and move to Mars. That is how I am now looking at this. And the rest of the events that we still have adapted into the movie include Lori and Daniel going their separate ways, followed by Daniel arriving to Hollis to learn about what happened to Dr. Manhattan. The vendor also learns about this news in a quick scene when this guy runs past his stand, while Lori is shown to be interrogated for the part she played in Dr. Manhattan leaving to Mars. The final scene from the issue is with President Nixon, played by Robert Wisden, and NORAD generals in a war room talking about moving on to DEFCON 2 when it comes to the possibility of a nuclear war now in Dr. Manhattan's absence. Then before moving on to the animated movie, the 3-hour 31-minute long version that I have been using for this video include the Tales of the Black Friar with Gerald
This is Sparta!
Butler narrating and voicing the sea captain in it. It is mostly done in segments cut from a 26-minute animated short and placed around the full movie as it's told. The first one, showing the shipwreck that the sea captain survived from alone, leads to showing the young customer reading it next to the vendor's newsstand, and the next segment of the sea captain narrating his fears while building a raft on the remains of his crewmates is fitted between after Daniel and Lori part ways and before Daniel arrives to Hollis's place. Okay, and now let's talk about how the 2024 animated movie managed to do the same.
How does it feel knowing you may have doomed hundreds of people? Leave me alone!
Well, the 2024 movie picks up from where the comic did with the events of issue 3, and has the Black Friday comic a little better tied to them while the young customer is reading it. While he does that, the Doomsday Crier arrives and actually speaks with the vendor about the world certainly ending that day.
Hey, how's the end of the world coming?
Today, for certain.
Lori leaving Dr. Manhattan goes pretty much the same as in the comic, although after having seen the 2009 movie use Adrian as a third party in this scene, Lori's outburst feels less justified and more like something that she and Dr. Manhattan could have talked about. After that, this scene could have been made a little better if Lori mentioned that this was not the first time Dr. Manhattan has done this.
I hate you.
Feels kind of overreaction, but, well, I'm a man, I couldn't know properly about. Going forward from there, the difference between this adaptation and its source material includes how Daniel does not mention having gotten a new lock. He and Lori have an early hand-holding scene before just deciding to go out together, rather than having Daniel invite Lori to join him at Hollis for beers. However, the biggest change from the source material is that Dr. Manhattan's interview turns out to be a trap, with the talk show host interviewing him being allied with Doc Roth in accusing him of having given Jacoby, Janie Slater, and Wally Weaver cancer.
John, Doug has reports of over 24 of his former associates who have been...
They caught him!
Do you have...
They were all...
to these allegations?
Even that... And to make that change work, Dr. Manhattan does not have his government handlers present to call the interview off. It's like they made a good change, but then didn't justify it by also taking something important out of it. As for Daniel's and Lori's fight against the gang members in the alley, well, just like in the comic, it mostly just happens. It is a background event that symbolizes the paralleling struggle between Daniel and Lori, while Dr. Manhattan has to struggle with being confronted by Doc Roth. However, the way how Dr. Manhattan ends up reacting to it feels like it was attempted to make it look like a big moment, but it ends up feeling lesser than in the comic and the 2009 movie. Could be one of those things Alan Moore said works only in comic book format, and Zack Snyder with David Hayter's script was able to make it look better without copying it one-to-one. Dr. Manhattan then leaves his clothes to the TV studio and tells the guard watching the ghost town in Arizona to pass the message to everyone that he is going to Mars while picking up the photograph.
This base is off limits. You don't belong here.
I believe you are correct. Please tell your superiors and Lori Uspechik that I am leaving for Mars.
Rorschach delivers the news to Daniel like in the comic in a hasty montage that also includes Lori being told that she has lost her home and meal ticket in Dr. Manhattan's absence. The vendor is not visited again by the Doomsday Crier, and his change of heart that we see in the comic is told more as a shocked expression on his face when reading about the invasion of Afghanistan. And President Nixon is then brought up to speed like in the comic and the 2009 movie. It's almost like both movies are now starting to rush through and skip certain events, or condense them depending on how much easier they can be told in this audiovisual format. Either way, it is fascinating to see this thing that Alan Moore said about things that only work in comic being challenged, with varying success with both movies. Considering how the next issue is mostly dedicated to Dr. Manhattan reflecting on his life on Mars, that video might end up being a short one. But as October is now in the next month, I should start balancing my projects to get at least the first half of Batman Long Halloween out during this year. We are once again at the end of the video, so here is the repeated reminder on how YouTube works. Like this video, comment about what I said about the third issue and how it has been adapted, share this video for more people to see, and subscribe to my channel for when the next video comes out. Also ding the bell to be aware for when I'm doing gaming streams for a chance to chat with me, and may your heart be your guiding key.